we think quite exciting. So employer needs. Now, I'm going to get you to raise your hands, and you could do it the old-fashioned way if you'd like a touch of exercise, or using, the magic button. So raise your hand if you've ever heard the employers that you work with mention any of these things. So has anybody ever come to you, and mentioned concerns resulting from communications breakdowns at work? So, something didn't happen because there was a failure of information to be shared one to another. Have they ever expressed difficulties with employee retention? If they're having trouble holding on to the employees they want to stay. Any frustration that employees don't associated with employees not following procedures, like, they're supposed to do it like X, but nobody seems to do it that way. Perhaps you've heard concerns that staffing levels aren't keeping pace with business growth, right? Like they want to be able to expand, but they can barely staff, the locations that they have, much less new locations. A desire to promote employees who are hesitant to be promoted. It's a supervisory position. They think employee X would be great in it, but the employee really isn't willing to take on that challenge. They don't really understand why. Concerns that employees aren't keeping up with the changes that are being implemented, whether with equipment or processes, software, or legislation. Or maybe they've even expressed concerns about specific skills, like employees not having the digital skills that they're looking for, or the communication skills, or the teamwork skills, or the time management skills. Now, I did see hands go up and down a few times. So it sounds like at least some of you have heard these kinds of concerns from employers. These kinds of concerns and the skills needs that I just outlined might actually be signs that workplace training is needed. The question, of course, is then, well, what kind of training? What kind of training is needed given these kinds of signs? Well, that's exactly what an organizational needs assessment is meant to do. Organizational needs assessments are a means to figure out what kind of training a workplace needs in order to address the business challenges and concerns that they are facing. So what's an organizational needs assessment? It's a process used to identify workplace needs that can potentially be addressed through training. It's actually flexible in design. It is meant to be customized to the setting in which it is taking place, so that employer goals, time available, all those kinds of things can be taken into account through the process. What an organizational needs assessment isn't is individualized literacy assessments. It's not going into a workplace, doing literacy assessments with employees, and then sharing that information with the employer. That is not what an organizational needs assessment is. It's meant to be broader, to look at what the needs are in a workplace that could be addressed through training. And here's what it typically involves. It's a process whereby the O&A provider goes into the workplace, gathers information, analyzes that information, and identifies needs. They do this and present it back to the employer in the form of a report with recommendations. The recommendations may point to the need, it may point to workplace literacy programming as a solution to the needs that have been identified. I'll give you some examples in a moment. It might also point to, it might suggest that employees would be well served in existing literacy and basic skills programs. It might also point to the need for other types of initiatives, like, clear language and design review, for example. So it might say, oh, wow, okay, people are having difficulty following these procedures. Partially because the procedure itself isn't clear or accessible, or it's ambiguous. So there's a need to, potentially, one of the ways to address this challenge would be to rewrite the procedure and make it easier to follow. So that's the ONA process. And as I mentioned, I'll give you a few examples of the kinds of workplace literacy programs that might, that could be delivered to address workplace, the needs that are identified through an ONA. Now, these are simply examples. The whole, the real strength in doing an ONA to identify training needs is that it allows the provider to actually customize training solutions to address those needs. So alignment between the needs that are expressed and the training solution is the goal. And that's why you start with an ONA rather than starting, say, with, hey, we have this wonderful training program, anybody want it? You start with an ONA so that you can figure out what the needs are, and then you design a program that matches those needs. So here are some examples. So an ONA may point to the need for a customized workplace literacy program that focuses on supervisory training, which might cover topics like goal setting and prioritizing, report writing, digital skills, communication skills that are specific to the kinds of communication tasks that supervisors would have to carry out. Another program might focus on health and safety. So, and when we think about, what is the workplace literacy that is associated with health and safety training, we're thinking about things like being able to interpret signs and symbols, following safety procedures, interpreting and reporting hazards. So you could see how the workplace literacy programming would complement sort of the safety training, right? Allowing the workers to actually essentially helping the worker work safely, right? They're getting the technical knowledge from the health and safety training, and then they're getting the, the sort of underlying skills to help them actually make use of that knowledge through a workplace literacy program. Another example would be training that is a workplace literacy program that helps the workers develop the skills they need to use new technology. So that would cover topics like digital skills, of course, reading equipment manuals to troubleshoot, or interpreting readings and measurements. Again, those sort of foundational skills that enable workers to actually make full use of new technology. So that is an ONA in a nutshell. I'm actually going to pass it over now to Karen, who will talk a bit about what MTML did last year and what the plans are for this year.
Hi, everybody. So yeah, I'm going to talk just ever so briefly about the pilot activities that MTML carried out, led last year. The project was quite contracted. It started in November, ended in March of this year, 2023. And this was all done with funding that was sort of earmarked to develop and pilot organizational needs assessments. So literacy networks across the province, MTML being one of them, received this funding. So what MTML chose to do, and each of the networks did things a little bit differently, what MTML chose to do was draft a toolkit that can be used by organizations, individuals who are carrying out ONAs. So that was drafted in December of 2022. We trained some folks on how to conduct ONAs using that toolkit. And then we worked with a couple of different organizations, Dixon Hall and PTP, both out of Toronto, who offer both LBS, literacy and basic skills, as well as employment services to their clients. They did an ONA each, and MTML also did ONA work. And we used those experiences, their feedback, to refine the toolkit. So at this point, MTML has a toolkit that has been used and refined based on its use, and that is what we are carrying forward into this pilot is both the experience of having conducted ONAs and these tools. So what did we learn through the findings? For every ONA that was conducted, we asked employers to provide feedback. And what we found through their responses was that the ONAs offer value for them. So they found the process itself relevant, both to their workplace and to their workers. Employers said that the process gave their company an opportunity to share their business goals and training needs, that the results of the ONA, which were produced and submitted in a report to employers, helped them understand which skill gaps could be addressed through training, and that they found the recommendations that they were given to be useful and clear and easy to understand. So that overall, they really felt like the time that they spent on the organizational needs assessment was time well spent. We also learned, not surprisingly, that ONAs present both challenges and opportunities. The biggest challenge in working with LBS programs was that those programs tend to have few employer contacts. And it's probably not coincidental that we worked with two organizations who have sort of these two phases of both LBS and employment services, because they have those employer contacts. The opportunities that we could see for LBS providers in the future for literacy and basic skills is that that kind of outreach to employers can result in referrals to their program. So one of the outcomes of an ONA might be that individuals in the workplace would benefit from skills upgrading, and rather than design a customized workplace literacy program, you can simply refer those employees to existing programs. And I know even Ambreen had some experiences talking to employers who had no idea that this kind of programming was available, free of charge, local, and so on. So that can be very helpful. Understanding workplace needs from an LBS perspective, because again, they don't necessarily have a lot of experience working with employers, it helps them to think about what kinds of programming they could develop and deliver that would be relevant in workplace contexts. And the other opportunity that we could certainly see was that workplace service delivery is a natural extension of working with individuals who are in programs right now, but are going on to work in the future. So it offers opportunities to work directly with employers to prepare those employers to receive workers, a little bit more of a transition and connection between training and employment. We also saw opportunities for employment service providers. It is a way of offering an additional free service that can enhance relationships with employers. And back to the kinds of gaps that Marisa was suggesting you might hear about when talking to employers. I can't get people. People aren't well trained. They don't show up on time. I don't know what's happening with this generation. They don't have good work ethics. All sorts of things that could speak to underlying essential skills gaps that could be addressed through training. So this is a free service that can be offered, and those ONAs can provide insight into things like why clients don't stay in their job. So it can be a helpful sort of starting point for maybe more meaningful and longer lasting solutions. So given all that we learned in the last year, here's what we're doing in 2023. We have funding, MTML has funding to conduct ONAs in Toronto and York region. As they were last year, they're free of charge to employers. There's a limited number, but there are a number that are available free of charge to employers. It's quite a good opportunity for an employer, right, to get this service free of charge. So what MTML is going to be doing in this year is identifying employers who might benefit from an ONA. And here's where you guys can come in. So providers like yourself could refer employers that you're talking to where the lights go off and you say, hey, wait a second, maybe this workplace might benefit from an ONA. You could refer that person or your contact to MTML to discuss the possibility of doing an ONA. Of course, there's no it's not an obligation to do anything. It's simply exploring, in the early stages, whether or not an ONA is something that they might be interested in and might provide value to their business. So that's one of the things that they'll do is sort of do some outreach and identify employers who might benefit. And they'll also continue to build capacity within the field to conduct ONAs by providing tools like that ONA toolkit and perhaps additional tools that could be developed this year, and ongoing support to LBS programs so that they're in a better position to offer ONAs in the future. So we're hoping that, knowing a little bit more about this service, about the possibilities of working with employers and offering them an ONA might be of interest to you. If so, you can contact MTML, and Ambreen will have an information sheet available very soon. That will sort of outline more about what we talked about today, what ONAs are, and it's really geared for employers. So it speaks directly to employers about what the benefits are of conducting an ONA, kind of outlines at a high level what the process is, and emphasizes things like it's customizable, doesn't have to take a ton of time for them. It's all about what their needs are and trying to build a flexible process that meets them where they are and doesn't add burden to a business. So we can provide you with an information sheet that you can share with those employers, and there will also be a referral process for employers who are actually interested in an ONA. So that's, 20 minutes, 18 minutes. We went through a lot of information, and I know there are a lot of you, but we do have a few minutes. If there was anything that either Marisa talked about or that I talked about that you'd like a little bit more information on, we can take we can take a few minutes to answer any questions.
Karen, can I just add one thing on MTML's behalf? So MTML is actually making a very conscious effort to work with employment services so that we can also support them, their employers or their clients. So it's very important that to integrate services. So this is just one of the ways. I mean, this was just the first training session, but if you don't know how to start a conversation, maybe you can reach out to me and just say, okay, what do we say? Or something like that, right? So if with any questions, I think this is a very good opportunity for you guys to offer to employers that, hey, LBS is doing these free ONAs for you. So yeah, reach out if you have you want more information.
Yeah. And I see that a couple of people have said, please email the information. I guess one of the options we could do is just make sure that that information sheet goes out to people who have registered for this session. I don't know if that's an easy thing for you to do, Ambreen.
I do have the emails, and once that information sheet is available, I'll email it to everyone.
Okay. Are there any questions about the organizational needs assessment process itself?
I'd like to hear a little bit more about the process, what's involved once the employer has agreed to participate. Is it involving a survey of all the employees? Can you tell us about the process?
Yeah, roughly speaking, I can give you a very high level overview. It begins with sort of planning with the employer, what they're, identifying what their goals are, what gaps they perceive, where they're, sort of give some context that helps the ONA, the individual or the organization that is conducting the ONA sort of customize a process that's going to work best in that context, right? Size of the organization, number of employees. Is there a particular employee group that you're looking at, or is this a problem that you see that it sort of permeates the organization? So getting a bit of a handle on that at the sort of early planning stage, and then mapping out a process where you're really just trying to collect information. And so what we do is after a sort of plan has been put in place, the next step is to gather information. And it's done in a number of different ways. I may not remember them all, so Marisa will jump in if I'm missing something. We do interviews with leaders in the company. Could be the general manager, HR manager, could be people, if it's a manufacturing site, somebody sort of on the frontline supervisory level. So trying to get that perspective. Also may do interviews with individuals in target occupations. So if there is one, a target occupation or occupations, again, depends on the organization. You want to be very selective about who you're interviewing. So we're not taking up a lot of people's time, but you're just trying to sort of identify, how employees perceive both the demands of their job and, where they might see gaps. So, what is it that they're being asked to do? Are they comfortable doing all the things that they're being asked to do? Are there things that they may feel uncomfortable with? And you're trying to find indications or evidence that there might be skill gaps that are contributing to some of that unease. So interviews, we do document reviews. So we ask to gather examples of relevant documentation that helps us understand what the reading demands are in the job, what the writing demands are, and math, if there is math, numeracy demands, as well as things like, getting a sense of, how often people meet and who they meet with and all of that stuff. We can also learn that in interviews. So any kind of document review gives us a better handle on what the actual requirements are of those occupations. And workplace tours. We'll ask to do usually at least one workplace tour to understand the context within which people are working. And that can give you a really good sense of, how work is conducted, but also, you get to look around and see what's pasted on the walls and, again, what are the demands associated with the job. And am I missing anything, Marisa?
Those are the most common data collection methods that we use for ONA, so no.
Yeah, and then you take all that information and you analyze it to identify where those potential skill gaps might be.
Mm-hmm. It looks like we have another question as well from Jamila.
Yeah, hello. Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much for the presentation. Actually, I do have like a couple of questions. So is there like a specific size of the companies you work with, or who can, get involved in this? Like, do you work with the small, medium, big size, and like?
Go ahead.
You go ahead, Marisa.
Just going to say, an organizational needs assessment can be conducted with an employer of any size. Last year, all three of the pilots were with small to medium-sized organizations. Those tend to be a little bit more manageable, right? Really large ones can be, figuring out all the training needs in a large organization can be a challenge. But, you could still, the ONA process is flexible enough that you could even, work with a large organization focusing on kind of one area where they might have needs.
Okay, thank you so much. My second question, like even the Francophone organization can be involved in this?
A Francophone organization where the language of work is French?
Yes, yeah, but actually the employees do speak also English.
MTML can conduct an ONA in English.
Yeah, MTML
sure.
can. Yeah,
No, sure. It will be conducted in English, but like you will be working like with Francophone organizations too?
Oh yeah, MTML does work. So College Boreal, Alpha Toronto, they do have LBS programs. And, it depends on referrals, then we can ask them to deliver a workplace literacy program. So they do French, yes.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. Thank you.
And I see another question about, so once the ONA is being completed, do you develop training for the employer? Yes, that's the whole idea, right? An ONA is kind of a means to an end. And so it could be that depending on, what the employer wants and can afford and all those things, they just want to refer people out to community programs. But more common is actually, targeted, customized workplace training. So yes, for sure. MTML, LBS organizations can work with the employer to design and develop and deliver customized training that really does build on and address the needs that were identified in the organizational needs assessment. That's the ideal situation.
And is there cost associated with targeted customized training? Well, actually this year there is funding for LBS providers to develop and deliver targeted customized training. So right now there isn't a cost.
So in the interest of getting you all out of here and back to your busy jobs, there's a thank you very much for your time and attention and your questions, and you probably will have other questions, and I know Ambreen is always very happy to speak to you about how MTML can sort of help to serve the clients that you work with, because in many ways we have very common goals. So we have a very quick poll that we'd like you to fill out if you don't mind before we say goodbye, and I'm just going to pass it over to Ambreen.
Yeah, thank you so much. If you could just, can you see the poll? Okay, so if everybody could just quickly, it's a very short poll. We just wanted more information if we need to conduct more sessions, so. But thank you so much everyone for joining, and stay in touch. Any questions you come up with, we're here.
Ambreen, is your contact information available? Paula asked, did you share your contact information already?
Sure, I can share it. But I mean, you can always contact on info@mtml and we'll definitely answer.
Okay. Have you gotten all your poll results?
I can't see it at my end,
Yes,
but
yes.
Okay.
28
someone
out of
says,
28.
Just to quickly confirm, contact Ambreen for the info from this session. Yes,
yeah, please.
Ambreen is your contact person. Okay, yeah, so once you've finished your poll, you can sign off, and we hope to be in contact with you. Again,
Thank you so much for your attention.
A quick question. If the session was recorded, can we get a copy of the recorded session?